So, introduce yourself to us
Okay.
for the ones of us that don't know you.
Yeah, so I'm Colton Smith with JEB Engineers. I've been working with Arthur and Weston and Mike and going through the storm drain master plan report, which has included the impact fee analysis and the storm drain utility fee, which is why we've got Susie Beckers with Zion's
Hi, Susie.
Bank here with us. So here, let me make sure I've got her turned up all the way.
I think she's muted.
No, you are muted. Susie?
Yes, hello everyone.
There you go.
Here, we'll turn this, take this, bring this down here to, so you guys can hear Susie. And so with that, we've have completed the storm drain master plan and identified capital improvement projects, which has included how much of that is to address existing deficiencies, which can go towards the storm drain utility fee to be paid under that, and how much is going to be for future growth and future development, and how much can that go into the impact fee that's developed. And so Susie's going to go through with us and kind of talk about that analysis, what those numbers are coming out to be, and kind of where the storm drain, the impact fee is kind of showing us where it's going to be going forward, as well as numbers for the storm drain utility fee and what that looks like over here in the next 10 years. So with that, Susie, I'll turn it over to you, and you go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, let me see, get this up here. I don't know what you are seeing, so do I need to make this a little bigger, or do you have a big screen?
There is a big screen, but can you guys?
I need a little bigger on those
All right,
screens
they
if
need
you
you
can
to
do
zoom
it.
in a little bit there, Susie.
That do it or drop more, whatever you want.
If,
Are we there?
I'm seeing no nay, so I'm guessing that we're.
Yeah, we can see
We're
it
okay.
behind there, so.
Okay, okay, well,
Yeah,
thanks
go
for
ahead.
letting us work
May
with you.
turn it to this other
It's been
too.
great. So I'm going to start here at the end of the road just for a minute and then show you how we got here. So this is the summary tab of the rate model. It's not the detailed tab yet, but I will show you that in a minute. What we do is we track a couple of key metrics. One, we're going to make sure that our net revenues before debt service and before capital costs are positive, because we cannot bond for operating costs. We just hurt the capital. So we look good here. And then we track the capital costs when these start coming on board. And you can see going across here, significant capital costs as we look out here. You don't have any debt, and we're not planning for any debt, but if you were, we would track the debt service coverage ratio, which would need to be 1.25 times the revenues to cover the debt. And then days cash on hand. And it may look like it's high, but it's going to come down to cover our costs here. So you want to have at least 180 days cash on hand to maintain a bond rating in case you ever would have something come up and you'd have to bond. So here we go to show you some of the options of what we can do. Right now you're charging $4 for single family, and you actually are for multifamily, but we are playing with the idea of a big initial increase. We can do all different kinds of numbers.
Hey, Susie.
And, yeah.
Let's show them the project, the improvements, just so they kind of have an
Oh, yeah.
idea where these numbers are actually coming from.
Good idea. That's a great idea.
Can you get her volume any higher?
And I'll make this bigger.
Hold on. I'm gonna put it here behind. That's where the speaker is. That's better.
Okay. Okay. Then you're gonna be big enough where you can at least see the year. So this is the year, and these are the costs that you have coming up. And so the model picks these up. We have about 18 million total here. We've put a construction inflation factor on here, so that when the model picks this up, it's going to add on 4 years of inflation. So if we look at the first one, instead of being 1 million, that comes up in here in the model, 029, there it is. it's going to be a cost, so it's negative of 1158 instead of 1029. And it's really easy. We can move them around. We can say, well, we want that in 2028. And if we change it down below, this is all formula driven. You can see up here for those of you who do spreadsheets. But we can change the years, very flexible, so we can play with the cost and the year. So these are your costs. I think, Colton, do you want to talk about any of these? Because I just took these from Colton. So.
Yeah, maybe jump over to the improvement tab
Okay.
if you can.
There you go. I'll make it a little bigger
Yeah,
too.
so these are the projects we've been working with, Arthur and Weston and Mike on these, of identifying these capital improvement projects and their locations. So we came up with kind of a very concept level estimated cost of what those projects to install would be, and then based on how much drainage was coming from existing users and coming to that, and then you'll notice the next column over is the cost to 10-year growth. So that's looking at, all right, over the next 10 years as growth occurs in Hurricane City, how much impact is that future growth going to have on that system, and how much of this is kind of beyond that 10 years capacity. So that's kind of those three different columns. So with the 4.8 million, that's how much with these projects would go towards the existing deficiencies and the existing users, and how much capacity of the project they would be using and then the 7.8 is how much for the future growth and their impacts to those storm drain systems and the need for them. And then with the 5.4 million, that's going to be kind of, as we relook at this in the future, that money would come into play and as we kind of look beyond 10 years and reevaluate, is the storm drain fee enough? Is it needs to be adjusted? Those kind of things. So kind of looking at that 10-year planning window is kind of the best. So that's kind of what the numbers that we're kind of, that Susie's spreadsheet is taking into account.
Yes, that's great to have that.
Question there, Mayor?
I can see the addresses on the first 4 or 5, and then you just got storm drain piping on 4 or 5 of them there. Do we have locations for those?
Yeah, so that is something that's in the our impact fee facility plan and in the storm drain master plan, that we've got locations with project descriptions.
I figured you had to have them in order to put them into there, but just it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see them.
Okay, so yes, these 3 time periods, existing, next 10 years, and beyond 10 years, add up to the total cost. Impact fees can be charged for the 10-year growth, and then for right now, but then further down the road, we can also charge them for this amount. So we do account for that in the model. And I think there was some question about this because we have all 18 million coming in as cost. We also have, however, though, we bring into here the impact fees. Now, I know they are in separate accounts, and this is only a model. This is not one fund. You will absolutely keep impact fees in a separate account. But the impact fees do not come in at the same time that you necessarily have the cost, incur the cost. So this model accounts for the revenue from the impact fees over time, so it reduces the cost of your rate study. So it is included in here as part of the model. So just wanted to make that clear. What else the model does, it shows the growth. It shows the revenues that we can expect, and if we would have a jump here in revenue and we're going to play with the rates in a minute. Operational costs come next, and you can see we've been growing those by about 5% a year. We can certainly play with that and use some different growth rates to see where you're at risk. Then interest, impact fees and all. These are our net revenues that are available for debt service. We have not built any debt service into this model, which is great, and you don't have any bonds currently outstanding. So these are the revenues that are available to pay for your capital costs. And so in the end here, it's your capital costs. We didn't have any beginning cash balance here. So we just track our ending cash balance, how many days on hand it is until we get down here. Let me show you, so that's the model in more detail, but if we do a summary, let's pretend now for a minute we don't have any rate increases. let's just go here. No rate increases at all. We don't want to do anything. As soon as these capital projects kick in, we start running out of money. In fact, we don't even have 144 days cash on hand. It's negative 144. So, and at some point, so we can't cover the capital costs. So you really have three options on your rates. You can either raise rates to cover costs, you can delay capital projects or not do them, or you can bond. And if you put a bond out there, you pay more over time with interest, but you don't have to put your rates as high. So if you were to say, we only want to go 50%, this rate increase. So here we go. We were okay for a while. So let me explain the colors on here. If you're between 150 and 180 days, it's kind of like a traffic light caution. You're getting close to being below 150. The bankers in our office say, absolutely, you go below 150 days, your bond rating will go down. Now, if you're not issuing a bond, you're okay, but it's always good to keep some cash on hand and to be able to bond if there were to be an emergency or some new federal regulation or something, where you had to decided you needed to do that. So you could go 50% and just do a 3% thereafter. Let's see where that takes us. It really doesn't take us very far. Now you could do 50 and then do another 50 if you wanted to phase it over time. You get more bang for your buck the earlier you do it. It's like compounding money, like you always tell your kids to invest young. It's the same idea. You're going to get more off your rate increase. So we could do another 50, just showing how it works. That got us closer, didn't it? Now maybe go 25. That didn't do it. So it takes us out here a little bit further. With that, we end up at about the same place in the end as we have done, or if we just bite the bullet, our rates are really low to begin with, and then do the 3%. But this is just a policy decision for you. My job is to make a tool that you can work with. But so you still end up, you actually end up higher and the going slower. So by 2033 with this method, you're at 1313, and if we go back and did what we're doing 50, 50, 50, I'm just showing you where you get your bang for the buck. See, you're higher because you didn't do it sooner, so you weren't collecting it sooner. That's where we kind of suggested the 175, but that certainly is a decision for the council to make. Do you have questions on this?
They might need a sec to digest.
Yeah, and I'll go back a little more slowly. I'm often accused of going too quickly, so I'm going to slow up. I will mention a few other things while you're thinking. So we have been charging, my understanding, and you guys at the city correct me, Arthur and Colton, if I'm wrong here, but we were charging $4 to every door, whether it's single family or multifamily. But based on the research that you have done, the work, a multifamily is really, so a single family is 1 ERU, equivalent residential unit. A multifamily is only about 0.37. So one reason we went this way too, if we did this, it would hold multifamily constant about 407, but you would get a big jump on single family and on non-residential for ERU.
Can you go back to those? Can you go back to those ERUs, Susie?
Yeah.
And just to give the council an idea of how those ERUs were determined. So single family homes, we determined, hey, okay, that's 1 ERU. And then multifamily, we actually went and looked at, and this was some of what the city had done, of looking at, all right, all the impervious area for a multifamily divided by the total number of units. Excuse me. What is the actual number of how their impact with impervious surface across the whole development? What does that number come into? And so that's where the 0.37 is, that once you divide it amongst all of the units, even though a multifamily might have generally more impervious area for a particular lot or development, then you would still have more units that are distributing or taking on that impact. So that's where the 0.37, and then for the commercial, we actually went and looked at all of the, looked at different of those single-family residents and delineated, all right, how much does a single-family home in Hurricane have, and looked at different size lots and came up with generally on average about 5,000 square feet for that ERU. So commercial or non-residential properties would be, for a single ERU, would be per 5,000 square feet of impervious surface across their development.
So could you go back to the list that had the different streets where these drainage pipes are?
Yeah, can you go back to the improvements tab there?
Yes.
So I'm not totally in the know on where we are with drainage with the city. Are most of these improvements, is it putting new pipe in? Is it bringing pipe up to a bigger size? Does this contemplate just the pipe, or also the cost of improving the road afterwards?
Great question. I'd say it's a little bit of everything. So some of this is new, like there's not a pipe there currently, and it's about putting, if the road would be constructed, putting in the storm drain pipe network with it. Some of it is storm drain pipe in existing roads that would be upsized, where we did include some roadway, unless the city indicated, hey, when we do this, we're going to completely reconstruct, so just give us the cost of what the pipe is, and the whole road's going to get reconstructed anyways. So it's a little bit of everything that you kind of mentioned there, of new pipes as well as upsizing in locations, or even rerouting water a different direction.
So 100 North is a replacement of pipe or upsizing, I assume. Is it going to tear up the street we just built?
No,
Okay. I was hoping you'd say that.
I could give you a couple of examples.
I think 400 West has got to be a replacement, and I'd say 1150 West, see, there got to be a replacement or upsize too, doesn't it?
Yeah. So those are good examples. On 400 West, we have an existing storm drain system that's failed because a lot of settling, and it needs to be replaced as soon as we move from flood irrigation to pressurized irrigation. That would be a good time to do that.
I'm assuming that one would be just a replacement of pipe, because you'd be trying to redo the road at the same time with, you were going to do it anyway or whatever problem.
Yeah, we're not going to pay for we're not going to use the drainage fund to replace the road.
Yeah.
But like on 1760 West, we have some deficiencies on 1760. So we've got a project in there to extend from State Street up to the existing storm drain that's south of 400 South.
Right.
We have on 1300 South by 180 West, where the water comes down off of Angel Heights, and there's no pipe. So that's another project. So those are the types of ones we're talking about. 3000 South, we need to put a pipe and a swale on both sides of the road. We need drainage facilities. So those are just a few examples.
Does this contemplate the airport? Anything at the airport?
I think the airport is pretty well self-contained. I don't think we have anything in this study that pays for airport drainage.
Yeah, the airport, I mean, it's there, but we're more all the water around it, directing it, not necessarily what was coming off of the airport.
I know it's still
deficiency there.
unfolding as it gets developed.
But I did want to interject something that's important for the city council, because whenever we talk about impact fees and utility rates, it can get pretty political, and you're the elected body, so people are going to talk to you about this. And we wanted to make sure we were proposing a defensible plan. And we have different kinds of land use, right? That honestly, someone could come in and argue, hey, I have a different kind of land use. You shouldn't be charging me as much as you're charging me. We've had in the past people come and take us to task on our water impact fees, for example, like, hey, we're a condominium. We don't use as much water as a single family home, right? And so that's why we have a different rate for single family versus multifamily versus commercial. We're trying to make it fair across the board so that when someone comes in and takes us to task, we can say, hey, this is what we did, and we feel like we did right. So like a multifamily unit is 0.37 of a single family unit. So just wanted to make sure you understand that. And if you have any questions about it, we could answer.
Yeah, we do need to keep in mind that we had a resident that was very upset about our $4 fee. So we could
We had a residents
$11 fee.
residents were upset with our $2 fee, and then we went to $4, and they were even more upset. So
Yeah.
I wished I'd have done it $20 right then when we first did it too, and then we wouldn't have had any more complaints for the 2 as we would for 20. So
Well, back in 2008, we had a guy named Larry Eitel that went through and did a lot of calculations. He collected information from probably you, Clark, at the time, and the streets department, and he calculated what he thought our drainage fee should be for our drainage utility, and it was $12. And so we're proposing an $11 fee per month with a 3% annual increase.
I know
And
that-
that keeps us in the green for a lot of years.
I know people won't be happy very much with it, but every time we have a big heavy rainstorm, we have people complaining about we haven't done enough for it. And we really, drainage is one from the very first day that I stepped in here, I felt like we were sticking our head in the sand, just pushing it down the road. And we've done some projects and we've done some good things to do it, but we have never really tried to keep up with the need on drainage. It's always just kind of been pushed off. And I know that's not going to be happy to have people be happy to have that, but you know, I just showing Mike yesterday a little picture on 300 South. The guy sent me a text and said, you got to do something with Lake Hurricane, you know, and he's got this, you know, puddle on the street, and it's one we don't have sidewalk, curb, and gutter on. His base in front of his house is tall enough that the water is sitting out on the street, and out of the 4 or 5 rainstorms in a year, he's going to get that puddle. He's just bound to determine that's a horrible thing, and there's no way I can see to fix it until we actually get some drainage systems in there. And I don't think it's a big problem, but he does. And so we have to remind some of these people, and some of them will say, I don't have any problems, you don't worry about me, but I do believe we have issues out there that need to be addressed, and so.
Do we have any data about what other cities are charging for drainage?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, Susie, you've got information about what other cities are charging, correct?
We do, but I don't have it up. It will take me a minute to find it while you're talking about other things. I can look and see what I can find.
While she's looking, you know, Arthur mentioned the water and the power rates. So when we raise those rates, that's a usage rate. It's kind of hard to see with drainage on usage.
Right.
You know, it's a whole different concept. And the question I'd ask is, why aren't we just funding this through our general fund? And we don't have a street fund, you know, on the bill, you know, a monthly street fund. We don't have a monthly rec fund,
And we could certainly do that, but you wouldn't take a property tax increase, and I think you'd have more problems with property tax increase to fund it. But that's still an option. You could do that because it could come underneath that same thing. There are a lot of entities, a lot of cities and stuff that have enterprise funds and general funds, and they do various things. Some of them have them under one category or another. Obviously, your power and water is always going to be an enterprise fund, but they're pushing pools into enterprise funds, and I don't really agree with those because they don't make any money. And it's kind of the same thing. Enterprise funds are usually meant to fund themselves and to pay for themselves, and that's where you get the utility fee to go in there. And your general funds just come from your general taxes, and it could. That could be a decision we made. But if you tried to fund this underneath the general fund, you either got to cut everybody severely back or you got to have additional revenues there. And the only source you have to really raise would be property tax. So,
Isn't it not possible, and this is probably an unpopular question, but do we have enough increased revenue from all of the increased sales tax to offset this additional expense?
well, right now you look at it and you say the budget that's coming in, we got to get $2 million out of it before we even get down to where we can balance it. And this would be cutting $2 more million out of it below that. So you'd have to cut $4 million out of the existing, which would probably take your budgets below where they are currently. So again, that's
Probably too aggressive, I just wondered.
yeah, and that's just, again, they're all good questions, and we can fund it a lot of different ways. There's lots of possibilities to do it, and it's like we can take a slower trajectory and raising the rates. But she showed you, you're going to get. Either you got to take, if you do a slower one, then you got to step up that 3% or do something further out or something to go. So, and the quicker you do it, the more likelihood you're going to keep in the black. And we can postpone some of these projects a little if that's what you wanted to do. They're not going to go away. They'll just be more expensive. It just won't do them as quick. But
So does that 3% also increase every year then?
that's what that proposal is. We get it up to that 11, and they do a 3% every year to keep moving it forward so it would stay ahead of the projects.
So it'd be 11 a month plus 3%, and then the next year another 3%. And
Yeah, and a lot of that is, and we set that to be what the current inflation is, which again is, we're kind of setting that now. So that's kind of trying to keep up with inflation as we go through it. So that's why 3% going
And it
forward.
could be 5%, or we could tie it to the inflation rate.
Right.
Anything you wanted to do with that. So.
Okay, the comparison I have for you is 5 years old, and I apologize. I
question?
think that's
Hold on, Susie. There was just one
He
question.
just asked about where the
Where does impact fees fit into this? Because,
well,
and I understand that, but if you have to upsize, could impact fees
Yes.
play a role in that?
and these projects, if you looked at the ones they had listed there, are broken out. Some of them, almost every one of them, has a component of utility fees and impact.
Yeah, and
and so it goes
we can jump to that too
Yeah.
once, because I think
right.
Susie's here.
And so any
for these rates,
upsizing
and
that kind of stuff.
We'll jump over there.
Yeah.
Three cities
So.
would be higher.
And the only problem with the impact fees, like they said, is you start out and do these projects, you might have a project you did that's 50% funded by impact fees, but you don't have the impact fees. It's going to take you a while to get them, so you're going to have to fund it some other way and then be able to kind of pay yourself back with impact fees when they come, because they always lag. So.
You're looking at St. George at $4.50 to $5.
So these are all 5 years.
Yeah,
This
so-
is from 5
They're
years ago.
5 years old.
Five
so
years
these have
old.
gone up, but it was just a nice chart, and you could see that even with that, you're right about in here, and I think most of them have gone up quite a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, it just gives you an idea. I think what we really ought to do is pull, come up with a list of 5 or 6 cities around here, and let's just look and see what they charge, or call and see, or it might be online, do the consolidation.
Yeah, and I think we do have that, Susie. I think I've got that graph somewhere that I could probably share with Arthur that he could share.
And those ones we usually get beat up more on. What's St. George? What's
Yeah, what's St.
Washington? What's
George,
Ivan,
what-
stuff, about it. So.
Yeah, we may have pulled those. I just don't know where my guys keep all that stuff that I have to pull the data. So, but that was one I knew of that was a nice looking chart. But it gives you an idea. There is a range. There really is a range. I have seen a lot of places increasing their rates lately that they're behind on stormwater. Or someone who haven't had a stormwater fee are saying, okay, our council will only go, whatever it is, $8. What will that generate, and what can we do of our deficiencies, projects we're behind on? What can we do for that? So I've seen that approach as well.
Well, we see a lot of them now. They're starting to do transportation utility fee, and so they're adding that on particularly. And I don't know if they're covering some of this in the transportation fee when they're doing it. We don't have one, and some of these other cities may have a transportation fee in addition to this. So there's a lot of different factors to be looked at when you start looking at comparing with other cities and what they've done. It's nice to see, and we like to have it, but you got to factor in what else they're doing sometimes. But yeah.
Susie, can you go in and show where the impact fees are coming in into this?
Yeah. Let me just show you. First, let me just show you the impact fee calculations on here. And so that was the 10-year improvement amount that could go into the impact fees. These were the growth and the ERUs. And those are tied to our model and consulting costs. We didn't have a fund balance. Well, we had this much. We just used it to offset. We have existing development costs though, and so we can't charge oh, this is small again, isn't it? Let me make it feel bigger for you. We cannot charge new development the entire impact fee and then say, oh, guess what? You also get to pay for these deficiencies over time in your rates, because that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. That was the TSSD one of years ago. So we actually take that, we make the credit. So instead of going to 1746, 1538, and then it goes down a little bit each year as there's less years to pay this. This is getting paid off over time. So here's your impact fee. It comes into this model right here. Here it is coming in, and the impact fee, that's the amount tied in, and then it comes in here as a revenue. So here we have, first of all, these are our operating revenues, which is just those rates. If we jump at 175%, you can see how our revenues will jump here. And then we have our operational expenses. We took the most recent budget. We've grown it out by 5% a year. And then in addition, we have here some interest income, because we're going to have some of this money sitting around, and impact fees. This is where they come in. It's just simply multiplying this growth right up here that we're going to have, and we've used these numbers because we're only getting the impact fee off 0.37 of our multifamily times that impact fee. And so then that comes in, I went past it right here. So we are bringing it in as a revenue. Now, like I said, we're not bringing it into the fund. Impact fees have to go into a separate impact fee fund. But those monies will come for this analysis. They'll come to help offset these capital costs that we're showing right. Then after the debt service, which we don't have, then we bring in our capital costs. And so those revenues are offsetting the capital costs, their fair share, based on that $7 million that we showed. Questions on that?
Scary.
Scary.
I don't know. I think that's just operational. I don't think there might be some.
Once again, I think we've kicked the can down the road for so long. I mean, unfortunately, at some point it comes back to bite you.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of communities, and you'll see that especially up on the Wasatch Front, that we're seeing with other utilities, that they're seeing big increases because they've kicked the can down the road so far, trying to keep those low. And then, to tear the Band-Aid off, they're seeing.
Could we kick this can for 4 more years and I'll have to worry about it?
I guess you could. That isn't.
Wes?
That is. There is a do nothing option always, but it's trying to see what's best. We want to provide you with the information to make that decision, and I think Arthur made that point of this. Anytime we're talking about utility increases or property tax increase, it's always going to get political, and
it is.
And you guys are going to get the heat for that.
Quick question. So up to this point, we've had a $4 fee. And we've gotten to this point, and with whatever infrastructure we have, what will the public be able to see as substantive changes that warrants the $7 increase? Beyond,
Can I just
from day-to-day operations.
Can I just go back and kind of preface that just a little bit? When we put the fee in, the fee was there. We did a $2 fee, and then we did a project. And I can't remember what the first one of the projects were, but the other one was 400 West. And we did one. And once we got it done and we got the bond out on it, we did another one. And when we started that project, we hit the other $2 in. So we had 2 projects we were paying bonds off. That was the only purpose for that $4 fee, was to get those 2 projects done and get done. We always contemplated if there was other projects, we'd have to raise the fee. All this time, we haven't done anything else with it other than use that. Now we've had some costs of some things. We've done some repairs and maintenance and some little projects out of that every year as we had funds, and paid operational costs out of it, and that's where we've been. And now we're paying some additional personnel for the MS4 and that kind of thing with it. So really, what was done with that is really hasn't covered most of what we're looking at here. But it's a good question, and we do need to answer because people will ask that. So
Am I hearing you right, Clark, that $4 was to do bond payments on projects that already happened, so we financed it, used the $4
to pay it off,
to pay that off, and then for servicing, we've just drawn from general fund to barely skimp by.
No, the $4 has still been on effect ever since, and so that $4 has
Bond been paid off.
15 years, I don't know. It's been quite a while, and we've used that $4 to pay operational costs because we still had to go out and do drainage projects. The street one of the things that Arthur was talking about with Larry Itel when he was trying to do it, he kept saying, well, you got a problem here. You don't have any personnel in your drainage budget, and yet we're using personnel to do things all the time, and they were coming out of the street department. So going back to Dave's question, we were funding a lot of this out of the street department because that's the personnel we're using, and still now. I mean, right now all we have is Roger that's in this budget, and he is the MS4, but every time Hayden takes his crews out there and they go up and clean up or do something for drainage and stuff, that's coming out of the general fund. And Larry was bound to determine we needed to put this in this other fund, and I kept saying, I understand what you're saying if you want to directly relate it, but as long as we can afford it and we're doing the way we do, who cares whether it comes out of the general fund or out of the drainage? And that's kind of why we didn't do anything with the rate, because he wanted to bump it up, and then that money would come. We would have more money in our general fund to cover our street costs and so that's kind of where it's been. And so that's a good question, because really the way I was going to ask the question was, if you're doing this and you're starting to generate these funds, if you're not going to bond for them, it's going to take you 3 years or so before you can do a project, because you got to get that money put together. So initially you could say, well, this is what we're going to do with it, but it may take them 3 or 4 years before you see them actually do a project for that money. So
do the money, we're going to raise it. We, kind of, as Councilor Street said, I think we've got to show the public that something's happening. Because I don't like paying money.
No.
We work here all the time. It goes to the rat hole.
Yeah.
And we've got to, if we're going to do it, we've got to come up with it.
Well,
Susie, can you bring back up the projects with their construction timeline?
And also, we need to be able to show, if we're going to replace a line or going to do something out there, we got to show what problems it's causing. If we're going to replace it because we feel like it needs to be done. And 400 West is a good example, but you can show it pretty easy. You could demonstrate that one real easy, but I don't know about 100 North or 1150 or whatever. We'd have to demonstrate why is it important to replace that line and what problems is it causing. So, and all good information to present to the public.
Yeah, so with this, you were 100% correct. The way that we've kind of looked at this is, all right, let's not go into debt and do that bond. We have identified projects that could be bonded for and be combined to do to start right out of the gate that we could bond for these projects, get something big in the ground, and then that gets paid off over time. But for this, what we were looking at is, all right, if we don't bond, what does that look like? So we've looked at their estimated construction year, and when will that go in? So, and that's an estimated year of when that project will go in. Some of the projects have been split up so that, hey, it's a $5 million project. Let's do that over 3 years because that's a big chunk of change. So we were kind of looking at, anywhere between $1 million, $1.5 million was kind of the construction for a single year. And so, and scroll down a little bit more, Susie, for all the projects. So some of it is to start out, you'll see that we're kind of looking at some of our first projects in 2027. I can't see that one.
2030s.
Larry, I'm going to make a little smaller so it's all going to fit on the same page, okay?
I thought we had one in
There's 2028 now. There's
so we were looking at 2028. So thinking, all right, if we get actually get someone on board to design and get actually constructed. Those first projects kind of really are kind of looking at, you know, we're a couple years away from having money to do those projects, to get it actually designed and in the ground. So looking at the first projects being constructed there in 2028, and then kind of there doing a project every year, you know, for the next 10 years, about anywhere between $1 million and to $1.5 million.
Did we ever
in
get
size.
the data on those other cities?
Yeah, there was some there. And so you kind of get the opposite of what you wanted, Lynn. You get to put the fee in now, and you'll probably be out of office before they actually see it being spent.
And so, and with this, we are planning on presenting a couple of options and then presenting a recommendation on, you know, of what we would recommend that you go with, but then it's still up to you as a council to decide.
I guess the question and would be, if we decided when there's no debt on there, that we wanted to be able to go to the citizens and say, okay, we're going to raise this, but here's what's going to happen, and we make them simultaneous so they see some action being taken. Do we have the capabilities of floating a bond on there? Because I'm sure we don't have the coverage on this fund. And would that take a higher increase in order to get the coverage to be able to get it? And it still would take a little bit of time, but that thought just makes it so you can put some projects in the ground while you're doing it. Otherwise, like I said, we'll charge the fee for 3 years, and people keep saying, well, how come you just took it and didn't do anything with it, you know? So
Yeah, I'm still flooding,
yeah.
nothing's happening.
I'm only hearing a little bit. I put a bond in 2027. If we did that, you could bond for $5 million. You would only have to increase your rate here at 50%. You'd start ring after a while, but you'd have your debt service coverage ratio. You want to be above 1.25. You have to, your bond covenants will require it. And so you really hear the caution is between 1.25 and 1.5, you know, just to say, hey, we're getting close, but you're fine. You could do that instead, although over time, you'll pay more.
Yeah, and I recognize that. I'm a proponent of paying it out as we go, because it saves money to the residents overall. But sometimes, I said, they don't have any trust in you, and so if you don't show them you're doing something, it's harder, even though it may cost them a little bit more. But
I just wanted to show you what the numbers would do.
no, I appreciate that, and I wouldn't necessarily feel like we had to reduce the rate on the thing. We could still go with 11 as long as we got other, and so you could have a little bit more after you got the first bond in and did a couple of projects. You could then go back and drop back to the pay as you go for whatever you could after that. But again, just options.
Would the 3% increase be like in perpetuity, or could we put a time limit, like, because I mean, after 5 years, that's a 15% increase,
Yeah.
and that, I'm just wondering if that could be something we would have to readdress after to see if it was still needed, or.
Well, the thing is, you go out here and you put out this schedule you've got in front of you there, and you do the 3%. You can see how she's got that put together. Susie's done a good job with that, and you run it out, and it shows you where your cash flow still is, and does your coverage ratio and everything else out there. You could go out and say, okay, we're only going to do it and make this schedule and say, okay, if we do it for 5 years after we do the initial one, then that'll take us out 10 years, then we're going to have to look at it again. But the realistic part of it is a lot of things that we've done in the past is we've tried to keep our rates low, and we're trying to keep them from being raised. But because of that, sometimes when we jump, we have to take big ones. When we did the water one, and they said, okay, every year we're going to charge 3% or something on it, we actually stayed a lot closer and a lot better, because most of the time your inflation rate was higher than that. And so we were losing ground. And I don't know that we want to make it an automatic all the time, but I think it should be looked at annually. And if you have some markers, like you have a certain amount of cash you got to keep in, number of days that are going to be there, and projects you're going to have to try to fund, and you keep that and you look at it, you've always got justification for it. I don't want to do it just because you do it, but at the same time, I think it needs to be looked at every year, because if you don't continue to do it, then it just makes a bigger increase when it comes. So
And Susie, remind me of
Puts us where we're at.
how often you recommend looking at utility rates.
Well, we'll give you the model, and you can track how accurate it is. So we always say, if there's a major event, what if something were to happen and, a couple of years ago, Norm Beagley in Santaquin, he just panicked because the building permits fell off. You lose this growth, and you're not gonna cover these costs, but you also may not need some. So if you have some, so we had us run a model for him. But anyway, I'm just using him for example. But so if you have a big change in any of these numbers, you're going to want to look at it again. So I don't know that we'll often say like every 3-5 years at the most. These models really aren't good for more than about 5 years, because you really, great as these engineers are, you really don't know what you need 10 years out or what your costs are going to be. And whoever anticipated that incredible inflation that we've seen, since COVID, that type of thing, we have to fix models to bump that up. Your growth rate will make a huge difference. If I changed your growth rate in here and brought it way down, this isn't going to cover you likely. But you might not need all the capital costs too. So I think it's just factors, changes in the assumptions we've used.
And so we can set that. We can go through and look at the numbers she has and say, okay, we're going to jump it up to 11, and then we're going to do 5 years at 3% and leave it at that. And then we evaluate it then and decide. And maybe we don't need it anymore. Maybe factors have changed. Whatever. We don't have to say it's going to be in perpetuity. You just need to take a mark and look at it again, and maybe you go back to it and say, we're up good enough now. We'll do 3% every 3 years, or something. It could be anything. So,
hey, Mayor, I've got a couple. I just looked a few of these up just for informational. Ivans is $1,550. That was just recently approved. Santa Clara is at $13.80. St. George is $7, and then they have another $1.50 for their flood plain fee with that. Washington is at $6.80, and then Laverkin is at $10.25. All of those are just stuff that were pulled off the internet, so thank you for what it's worth.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
So 4 looks really good with that.
It does.
Yeah. 4 does look good. I'm in my own budget, it's a pay-as-you-go. I'm always much more a fan of pay-as-you-go, but then that is hard because then you can't start anything right away. And I know.
Your own budget, you can set that aside, and you're doing it and building towards it. But citizens, if they got to see something, if they're going to raise, they got to see something sometimes. And I would just prefer to do it, but I don't know how much flack you get after you convince them that this is what's going to be. Then, yeah.
So, to your point of seeing action, we are tackling some pretty big road projects right now that have some pretty big drainage components.
Okay.
And while we may not exactly be taking funds from the drainage fee, like we have one of those projects, 1150 West, that is out there a few years. Well, for the 650 South projects, we're going to have to build an outfall. We got a lot of drainage problems on 650 South, and we're going to be going down 1150 West with a new pipe with that project to make it work.
So I'm sure you'll have something in 1400 when you're going to do it as well, because when you're putting them in, you got to get it done. So.
Right, and there's drainage that comes down from between 1760 West down through Pioneer Estates that we're going to have to gather that all up. So we are consistently delivering
That's a good
drainage
point.
projects.
And
But
we
like,
could help emphasize that some of those are being
Yeah.
spent right there, which would help.
and it's important for everybody to also know that like our street sweeper truck, when it's out there working, that's out of the drainage fees where that comes from, and it's a consistent effort that's taking place. So
On the MS4, I don't know if it just in and of itself, but we might have to raise it before more than $4 to the $4 just to get to what we need to do there. Either, and I know that Joseph was asking just a minute ago, is any of this because of MS4?
it is, yeah. So if you look at our budget from year to year, the first year is a lot lower than the next year that we show on the model because of MS4.
Tim, Mike?
Yes, talked about Larry Eichel, keeping some historical records on the street department when Larry was here. And we still today track the hours that are spent from the street department in drainage. It averages about 30% man hours of the street department is spent in drainage. You can also equate and extrapolate that where the men are, so is the machinery and so are the other resources. So generally, you could say that 30% of the street budget is spent on drainage. So when you take a look at the street budget and think of 30%, you can see that there's quite a bit of money that we spend on drainage each year.
Out of our general fund right now.
Right.
Yeah.
The sweeper truck was mentioned. They're approaching $500,000 now. They're good for about 5 years. Once you get 5 years on them, they start causing lots of problems and wearing out. Another thing is that sometimes development causes stresses on our system. Sometimes we are required to participate with development in an upsize for a drainage project. So that's one of the places that we've used some of the existing drainage fees, is be able to participate with development on upsizing drainage situations, and we pay that out in cash and those kind of things, because we have not had an impact fee that we could use a credit on. So drainage is kind of one of those things that you just don't see all the time, especially if it's not raining. I mean, the nuisance water is going down the gutters and everything's working, and you just don't see it. But there are real costs that are there day in and day out. So.
Well, I'll tell you, we got one prominent citizen, I guess I can call him prominent, that really gets on his high horse about this drainage and thinks we have been so lax and haven't taken care of it and whatever else with it, that he likes to get out and say things. And I don't know if I can get him directed in the right way to say the right things, but if we got him on board, you know, he'd give a what for us for all the problems we got to fix. You know who I'm talking about, don't you, Arthur? I don't know if I can control what he says or not, but you know, he has a lot of video stuff that he's taken and everything else, complaining about our poor grading system. We haven't done it right, and we need to spend the money to get it done. So
another thing that we do track, and we track this because the auditors require it, is we have to track every year the capital cost of infrastructure that development puts in and we accept. I would say that I didn't do any numbers on it per year, but I would say that we book anywhere from $3 to $5 million worth of improvements in the drainage system every year that development puts in and pays for. So, and
then we inherit to maintain it and take care of it. So you have to put money aside to be able to help take care of that in the future. So
yes.
Does this study factor in drainage improvements that might actually not be city expenses but would fall on developers? Or are we...
This doesn't contemplate any of that. they do the ones inside their subdivisions and whatever. This is just trunk lines taking the water away from wherever it's at to get it to either the wash or some other drainage basin or basins themselves.
So the project expenses here, we fully anticipate to be city expenses, not developer?
Yes. If there's anything like they were talking about, if they had some where we had to do an upsize, it shouldn't be the developers. Most of the time we'll have them pay for it and then give them impact fee credits, but we haven't been able to do that because we haven't had impact fees, and that could be done that way, or we had to help pay for it out of whatever cash we had. So there could be additional expenses that would be in here that we'd have to cover, but they would be, this developer would still pay their right share. So.
And if I could add something, I ran like the budget. I just want to let you guys know. So like for this year, I'm estimating that our operations are going to be about $500,000. Next year, I'm estimating it's going to be about 1.9 million. So we're adding new employees into
This
this
is all drainage related?
All drainage related, yes. And MS4 requires us to have a separate budget to track all of these. And so I put all the costs, including costs from streets, into this budget. And so that's really, it's going up like 72% increase in the budget. And I'm estimating that with no changes, we're going to be negative about 1.2 million in our budget, just the way we're going now without doing projects.
That's per year.
So are you actually physically pulling those wages and stuff out of the street?
I'm going to do an allocation.
You're going to do an allocation.
Yeah. So in order for this study, they needed to see what the actual costs were. So we sat down with the streets department, and I think the streets actually said they use about 60% of their man hours for drainage projects. So we sat down, we took costs, we allocated it. So I have it all in this drainage budget. Like, so if you want to see it, I have it ready.
Is it your intent then to treat it like we've done with others, and so the drainage fund will be paying the general fund back for the cost of those services?
Right,
which
because of MS4 requirements,
but
they require us to track
do that,
these.
then it's we'd actually have a lot more money in our general fund because of what we have there, and if we decided we didn't want to take that, we still wanted to use that for the drainage, then we'd have to actually turn around and put the money from the general fund back in the drainage fund in order to cover it. I mean, that still could be done, so we didn't have to distort it that much. Because I don't know that I want to turn around and try to jack this one up enough to cover all those costs and then say, now we got $1 million or $2 million in the general fund because we took this and put it in the drainage fund, and we'll raise the rate to cover those, but then we'll use it for other things here. I don't feel quite about right doing that, even though it's legitimate and right. But we've always done that in the past.
I think it's just good for council
funding.
to see how much the general fund is covering these utility services that could be going to other places. I think it just depends on what the priorities are and what you as council feel like the citizens want.
Yeah.
So, Paige, I don't know if this is possible or not, but could you figure out if we did this through general fund instead of raising the taxes through the drainage fee, how big of a property tax increase that would be if we funded it, if we raised the property tax enough to bring these funds in? Because that's basically what we do. If we approve this, we're approving a tax increase equal to that. So I'd like to know what that amount would be.
I'm not sure how to do that, but you never know. You never know if you don't try. I can give it a try.
It'd just be sixes.
Well, yeah, just so we know what we're doing. I mean, it is sixes. It's money coming in one way. We're calling it a fee instead of a tax. And if we call it a tax, how much is that tax increase, property tax increase, to generate that much revenue instead of doing it through fee?
If you look at any of these figures and figure out what our mill levy is that we get, that should tell you how much you're going to have to increase it get that same dollar.
That's exactly what I'm asking for.
And I don't think it'd be that big. Yeah.
Should be, just so we're clear on what we're doing. I agree this needs to be done. I feel like we may be in some litigation areas if we don't do drainage, and we cause damage to people's property because we have not taken care of the problems, kicked the can down the road. But I think we just need to know what we're doing as we do it.
So what did we say? This was supposed to generate 1.9 million or something out of that. Right now, last year's property taxes came in at 3.6, and we're a little ahead of that this year. So that's for the whole city, as we're bringing in $3.6 million in property taxes. If we want 1.9 out of that, then there's your calculation.
Except for you wouldn't need the 1.9 because that's taking the money from the general fund already.
Need
So
to
if you
pull all those off.
subtracted that off, then you wouldn't have as big of an increase.
Yeah, but you're still that's a very hefty increase.
It could be a
on your
quarter,
property tax.
25% increase or whatever
increase probably,
on it in your property tax.
Good, thank you.
But it'd be nice to actually get the right calculation on that so we actually knew. I mean, in a lot of ways, Dave, I would prefer that just because I don't like all these other little fees. If I had my way, I'd just put it all in the property tax and forget a lot of these other taxes. But it's such a bad tax for people. They don't feel like they ever own property because it's that way, and it's all at one lump sum. And so I appreciate that fact. But I'd just soon see it all at once rather than be nickel and dimed. But that's not what most people want. So anyway.
There's some entities don't pay property taxes that need to pay their storm drain fee, like a school building or a church building.
Yeah, and which is true.
And to be kind of piggyback on that a little bit with the property, with the commercial, a lot of times they're kind of the biggest impacts to those, and they have the highest impervious area, so they have the highest runoff. And they're still paying $4 just like anybody else. And so that's kind of how the storm drain utility fee also is taking into account your bigger users, let's say, those those that are actually contributing the most runoff to the storm drain system, and putting more of that burden on them as opposed to on the residents.
Yeah. The fee that we did before, we just said we need this much money, we just split it up. It was nothing scientific other than we need this many dollars. So definitely we need to have a better refined system to. Well, any other questions? We probably need to get on with the other part of the meeting, but yeah, we did. We talked about what they are, know what they are. He went,
About $1,500.
yeah, that's why we could see on there, so we knew what that was too. So I guess the question is what is the contemplation, I guess, now moving forward? Is this going to something we'll bring back to the council on our next meeting and ask us to adopt the impact fee and increase the rate? Or
so after all the work that we've done with JUB and Zions Bank, these are the recommendations that we have for the council. And so if you have feedback for us that we can take back and go to the drawing board with, then we can do that. Otherwise, we want to finalize all the reports and get them posted for public notice and put it on the agenda for adoption.
Okay, and what does the council want to do? I guess my kind of feeling is that we need to be able to give them any feedback and things like calculating your property tax rate to get it more refined to specific. If that's something you want to have before then, you feed that to them. But there's other items you feel like they're missing or you don't understand, we need to have a little bit of time to do it, but we need to do it quickly and not draw it out. And you're prepared to have them bring it to us in 2 weeks, or do you feel like it ought to be a month and give us enough time to look at it? So
is this $7 increase going to translate into $7 worth of extra infrastructure and drainage service provided to the city, or is it really partly paying for the overlap that we have right now and just putting more money in the general fund?
Well, that's my point, is when she's talking about pulling it over there and putting it in there, and if they do want to count for it all in there and they have to do it on MS4, that's fine. But I have a hard job doing that and saying, okay, we're going to take $1 million worth of expense out of the general fund and translate it into putting in this dollar, and then we use that for something else. It's like doing a backdoor property tax increase. You know, I'd really feel like if we're going to do that, you almost need to drop your property tax rate by that amount just to offset it somewhat. That's my personal feeling. Or else you take that money and you don't save it in there, but you put all the expense in the drainage fund, and then you actually make a transfer from the general fund to pay that $1 million, so you don't have to raise as much. So, you know, that's a good question. You know, that's something we have to decide one way or the other.
Because I'm all for, you know, MS4 is the new reality, and we're way behind on drainage projects and need to fund it properly and be responsible. But if we are overshooting to generate more money for the general fund, and that $7 doesn't actually address those issues that I've identified, but replenishes general fund that we've historically used to cover some of this expense. I don't want to overshoot and overhurt the taxpayer. So
yeah.
And I think it's kind of the answer would be both. It is going to cover some of those costs. Obviously, MS4 has brought in a whole new series of things that we have to do, and there's money associated with that. But just from my perspective, being over the streets and drainage in the time that I was, we would try to do some projects, but we didn't have the scale of what we're looking at for the capital improvements and stuff, the money there. So we did some smaller projects, but in order to generate the money for some of these large scale things, we have to increase that rate. So it's kind of both in a way. And just for your information on impact fees, I did see a couple of these when I was scrolling through there. Washington City is about $4,800, and I think St. George is like $4,700, so they're pretty close to each other.
And ours is,
It'll be 15.
We don't have one right now, so it'll be.
And we're proposing up to 1,500.
Yeah.
Well, so what's your pleasure? They get ready for next time, or do you have enough questions and things you want to ask them, and give a little bit more time for us to sort it out before they bring it?
I would like to see both, what it looks like from a property tax increase and just the way we've talked about tonight. I think that would be good to have both of those available. And as far as I go, I'm more of a pay-as-you-go. I think that's a more frugal way to go. So.
Well, then I guess kind of get it prepared for that. I mean, if we have enough questions or other issues, please get with Arthur or Wes or, Mike, whatever you need to do to get any other questions answered. And if we put it on next time and that's not what you want to do, we can always, feel like we got to send them back with some more information before we pass it. So
I think we're about ready. I think we've answered a lot of questions here. It could take real leadership to raise taxes that much.
Now,
I think it's been kicked down the road. I think it's time. So I think we need to take care of it.
Okay, another dirty question, I guess, for you, and say it that way because we do these things and we put it on the agenda and it comes here, and 95% of the people will never ever know it's even coming. Do we want to advertise it and put it out so people can come and have it heard before we pass it?
I believe we do, and we give the equivalent property tax. Yep. We do it completely clear, and people know exactly what we're doing. And we hear it, and then we still do it, and we just own it.
Agree.
I think if you're going to do that, we probably need to be prepared with the drainage problems we've had to be shared, so that the nature of the problem
with videos. Yeah,
it's it becomes an optics game, right? And if you don't have a problem to solve, why charge people?
Well, I'm just in favor of full disclosure, and I hate doing these things and have people come back later and see why'd you do them. I'd like to give them an opportunity to say something, but that means we got to face the fire, and that's what's going to be. And we need to do something to get it out. And if that's the case, it's going to need to be postponed a little bit in order to get something going. And then do we do it as a separate meeting? I would anticipate we wouldn't have enough room in this room to host it.
Yeah, we probably need to.
But I think we've got to have the ducks in a row first.
Agreed.
We've
Yep.
got to know where the problems are, and our those lists is where we're going to start. Are they part of those problem areas? And we've got to have a full plan of what the problems are, what we're going to do to resolve it. Be ready to implement, if we're going to do it.
Okay, then I guess our task to give to our staff is we want a detailed presentation, including pictures of problems and whether it can be under a property tax or utility tax and the impact fees, and just a good presentation you can give to address all of those issues that people would probably ask. So.
And especially what other cities are doing. for
Yeah,
impact
including
fees and
that,
for
Yes,
rates.
definitely
That's
need
very
that,
important
yeah.
background information.
So I guess my question with the presentation is I feel like just fielding some of the calls that I have over the time I've been here, different people see and have different problems. I mean, are we going to have 100 people show up that are all have different problems?
Yes.
Because obviously there's certain areas that I know of that we've had issues with. We continually have that. But I just, if we have a room full of people that only have one, say like the one that you showed us the other day with that
right.
there, compared to one where we have, streets washed out type thing. I mean, I have pictures of some of that type stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't have the.
And I think you take the ones that have the damage. These other things sitting there are not going to be that big a deal. And you'll have somebody sitting there and they're going to say, is this going to fix my problem? And you're going to look at them and say, no, it's not one of the projects on there. It's going to be down the road. But it could potentially do it in the future as we get down to it. It's just not as big as priority as some of the others. And I know we're going to find people who are going to come in there with their pitchforks and don't want anything done. And you got some others that want to see you do a certain project and they'll be behind you if it fixes their problem. But
Yeah, and I think just looking at that list that we came up with, some of those people are going to be like, well, why do we need that? And it's more of a capacity type issue where it's, the last point in the line before the wash or something that we've noticed that there's a deficiency. And it's not necessarily like, oh, we had an event that happened in a subdivision, and they're upset about it.
Yeah.
So they may look at that and be like, well, why do we need that? But like I said, I can get some pictures together of things that we've noticed since, and I know Hayden's got some from our last few rain events. So,
well, I know that at 200 west and 100 north, I've seen storms, and I don't know if we've upsized things since then, where that water was coming down and shooting up out of the box, and then you could physically see it shoot up 4, 5, 6 feet and then run into a piece of people's property right there. That was because you didn't have the capacity to get it out in the wash. So there are backup issues, and it may not be today, but somewhere one of those boxes are going to be, somebody's going to get flooded away if we don't have the capacity at the end. So we have to address those kind of things too. So I know we don't have answers for everything, and it's not a fun project, but I feel like if we're going to try to get trust with people, we need to go in front of them and talk to them. And that may mean when we get all done, or say we're going to go ahead anyway, and they're going to go, well, you didn't listen to us at all, but we didn't do it behind their backs and wait for them to see it on their utility bill. So.
Well, and I know, Weston, I know since we've been in here, we've had some flooding issues that have come to light big time, and storm drain or retention basins or whatever that have almost flooded over allegedly into homes. Those are the things we need to be able to have, so I think we can get to the people. And, honestly, yeah, I think we got upsizing we got to do. But if we've got a major problem in an area, maybe it's got to be on the list so that, upsizing is one thing and people are not going to get a warm and fuzzy out of that. But make sure we're doing I guess maybe across the board different kinds of projects so we can show them that, if they're going to spend the money, that they're getting their money out of it.
And they also
nobody likes a tax increase, but the last thing they want to do, and I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, people have a tendency not to want to trust government. And I think that we need to be very transparent if we're going to do something, exactly how we're going to put it back so it benefits the public.
Well, if you guys can put something together for us, say by next meeting or something. I don't know if we do a presentation or a meeting, but maybe that's what we need to do, and we get a chance to look at it, and then we can schedule something and we'll go from there.
I like that.
Susie, did you have a comment or?
Yeah, I have two comments quickly that might be helpful. Mill Creek, years ago, a couple of years ago, I actually used their video that they put together. They were a newly incorporated city. It's incredible. It's almost funny if it's not your city, how bad this infrastructure was. And it's really cute. I'm going to send it down to Caden and to Paige. It gives you some ideas of how you might be able to portray this to your city. It was really effective for Mill Creek, and it was so good I actually used it in a presentation I did at the league. Second comment was, if you want to know what that tax difference is, I mean, a quick and dirty back of the envelope way to do that is simply to take how much money you think you need per year, 2 million, whatever it is, divide it by the taxable value of the city. You should have that. If not, you can get that online really easily. And then that gives you like a 0.0004, whatever it is. Take that mill rate and multiply it by like a $500,000 home times 0.55, because it's going to get the primary residential exemption. And that's going to tell you what the average impact's going to be per year. And so you can get a pretty easy number on that. Yeah, those are just two things we were talking about, and I thought they might be helpful, and that's all.
Yeah, I think that's Thanks, Susie.
Yeah, thanks, Susie.
Right.
But yeah, and just to, when we do come next week, we were planning on with the public going through each project that we've identified there, show it, so that they can see what the project is, where is it going, what's the issue, why is it, where's the flooding happening, so that we can kind of see each project and know why are we doing this, and here's why.
And my intent right now is to have something that the council can see, and then we'll schedule one for the public.
Yep.
So.
So.
All right. We'll give you, even though we're way behind on our 5 o'clock meeting, we'll give you 5 minutes or something, take a break, and then we'll get on with our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. Appreciate it.